They struck her because it amused them. Ruby Bell pressed her back against the cookhouse wall, watching three men advance through the lamplight. The storm outside rattled the windows. Rain drummed against wood like impatient fingers. Jasper Colt rolled his shoulders. His boots scraped against the floorboards. The two miners flanked him, grins splitting their weathered faces. "You got some nerve helping that Mexican boy," Colt said. His voice carried the weight of authority and cruelty. "Company don't pay you to play nursemaid." Ruby's fingers found the wooden spoon at her waist. Her knuckles whitened around the handle. The injured worker had needed water. Basic human decency. She'd given him both. Just doing what's right. The words left her mouth before wisdom could stop them. Colt's eyes narrowed. He took another step forward. Right according to who? Thunder shook the building. Lightning split the darkness beyond the windows. Ruby counted heartbeats between the flash and the sound. The storm was moving closer. Colt's hand shot out. His palm cracked against her cheek. The force sent her stumbling sideways into the preparation table. Flowers scattered across the surface like fine snow. "That's for talking back." The second blow came from his fist. It caught her shoulder, spinning her toward the wall. Pain bloomed across her back as she hit the wooden planks. "That's for interfering with company business." Ruby straightened. Blood traced a thin line from the corner of her mouth. She wiped it away with the back of her hand. Her dark eyes held steady on Colt's face. The miners chuckled. One of them cracked his knuckles. The sound echoed in the small space like breaking twigs. "She's got fight in her," the taller miner said. "Makes it more interesting." Colt nodded. His smile held no warmth, only the satisfaction of a predator cornering prey. "Company policy," he said, advancing again. "Workers who step out of line need reminding about their place." Ruby dodged the next swing. Her feet carried her toward the stove, putting the heavy iron between herself and the men. Steam rose from a pot of stew she'd been preparing for tomorrow's breakfast. "3 against 1 seems fair to you." "Fair," Colt laughed. The sound bounced off the walls. "Nothing fair about this world, girl. Sooner you learn that, the better." He lunged around the stove. Ruby grabbed the ladle from the pot. Hot broth scattered across his shirt. Colt cursed and backhanded her across the face. This time she fell. Her knees hit the floor hard. The taste of copper filled her mouth. The miners closed in. Their boots surrounded her on three sides. Ruby looked up at their faces. She saw no mercy there. Only the cruel entertainment of men who'd found their evening's amusement. "Please," she whispered. The word tasted like ash, like surrender, like every compromise she'd ever made to survive in this harsh country. Colt reached down, his fingers tangled in her hair. He pulled her head back until she was forced to meet his eyes. "Please what? Please stop." "Now why would we do that? We're just getting started." The door burst open. Wind howled into the cookhouse, carrying rain and the scent of wet earth. A figure filled the doorway, tall, broad shoulders beneath a heavy coat. Water dripped from the brim of his hat. Colt released Ruby's hair. She collapsed forward, catching herself on her hands. The newcomer stepped inside and closed the door behind him. His movements were deliberate, controlled. "Storm's getting worse," the stranger said. His voice carried the roughness of a man who spent more time talking to mountains than people. Colt straightened. His hand moved to the knife at his belt. "Cookhouse is closed." "Wasn't looking for food." The stranger's eyes moved from Colt to Ruby. Something shifted in his expression, a hardness that hadn't been there before. "Looking for shelter. Find it somewhere else." The stranger removed his hat. Water cascaded to the floor. His hair was dark, streaked with premature gray. Lines mapped his face like dry riverbeds. His eyes held the color of winter sky. "Name's Gideon Hawk." He hung his hat on a peg by the door. "And I'm not going anywhere until this storm passes." Ruby pushed herself up from the floor. Her legs trembled but held. The stranger's presence had changed something in the room. The miners shifted uneasily. Even Colt seemed less certain. "You picked a bad time to visit," Colt said. "Seems like it." Gideon's gaze settled on Ruby again. She saw him take inventory of her injuries, the split lip, the bruise forming along her cheekbone, the way she favored her left side. "Ma'am," he said, nodding in her direction. Ruby couldn't find her voice. The simple courtesy felt foreign after months of abuse. Tears threatened at the corners of her eyes. Colt moved between them. The girl was being disciplined. Company business. "That's so," thunder crashed overhead. The building shuddered under the assault of wind and rain. One of the windows rattled in its frame. "Best you mind your own affairs," Colt warned. Gideon unbuttoned his coat. Beneath it, Ruby glimpsed the worn handle of a revolver. The stranger's movements remained calm, but something dangerous had awakened in his posture. "Funny thing about storms," Gideon said. "They have a way of washing things clean." The miners exchanged glances. The mood in the room had shifted like the wind outside. What had been sport moments before now carried the potential for real violence. Colt's hand tightened on his knife. "You threatening me?" "Just making conversation." Lightning split the sky. In the brief illumination, Ruby saw Gideon's face clearly. The man had seen violence, done violence, survived it. The knowledge sat in his eyes like sediment in still water. Colt must have seen it too. He released his grip on the knife, gestured to the miners. "We'll finish this later," he told Ruby. The three men filed toward the door. Colt paused at the threshold. His eyes promised retribution. "This ain't over." "No," Gideon said quietly. "I don't expect it is." The door slammed shut. Ruby and the stranger stood alone in the cookhouse. The storm raged beyond the walls. Rain hammered the roof like thrown stones. Ruby's composure cracked. The tears she'd held back spilled down her cheeks. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. "They hit me for fun," she whispered. The words hung in the air between them. A confession, an accusation, a cry for help that she'd never dared voice before. Gideon stepped closer. His boots made no sound on the wooden floor. Ruby looked up at him through her tears. "Show me," he said. Ruby pulled back her sleeve. Purple bruises mapped her forearm in the shape of fingers. Gideon's jaw tightened. His eyes traced each mark with the precision of a man reading tracks. "How long?" "Since I started working here." 3 months. She rolled her sleeve down. The fabric settled over the evidence like dirt over a grave. Gideon moved to the window. Rain streaked the glass. Lightning illuminated his weathered profile. "You don't trust me," Ruby said. "Smart. Then why did you help?" Gideon turned from the window. His eyes held shadows deeper than the storm. "Because they were enjoying it." Ruby understood. The cruelty had been recreational, sport for men with power over those without. She'd seen that look before in other places, other faces. Wind shook the building. A shutter banged against the outer wall. The storm was settling in for a long siege. "I keep records," Ruby said. She moved to the flour barrel in the corner. Her fingers found the loose board behind it. The wood shifted. A leather journal emerged from the hiding place. Gideon watched her hands, steady despite everything, purposeful. Every incident, every worker who's been hurt. Ruby opened the journal. Pages of careful script filled the lamplight. "Someone needs to know." "Who you planning to tell?" "The territorial marshal. When he comes through town." Gideon's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes, a recognition, a pain that ran deeper than flesh. "Marshall's been through recently. Not for over a year. But he'll come." The certainty in her voice cut through the storm's noise. Faith in a system that had already failed her. Gideon knew better, had learned the hard way how justice worked when money spoke louder than truth. Ruby flipped through pages. Names, dates, detailed accounts of systematic abuse. Her handwriting never wavered, each entry recorded with the precision of a court clerk. Martinez, broken ribs for asking about his pay. Her finger traced the words. Chen, split scalp for speaking Chinese to his brother. The pages turned. Williams, disappeared 3 days after complaining about working conditions. Disappeared. Gone, his belongings too. Foreman said he went back east to family. Gideon moved closer. The journal's pages revealed a pattern. Workers who pushed back vanished. Those who stayed learned to endure. How many gone missing? 7 in the past 3 months. Thunder rolled across the sky. The cookhouse lantern flickered. Shadows danced on the walls. Ruby closed the journal. Her hands trembled slightly. "You think I'm foolish," she said. "No? Then what?" Gideon returned to the window. The storm showed no signs of weakening. Rain hammered the earth outside. Somewhere in that darkness, dangerous men planned their next move. "I think you're brave. And I think that's going to get you killed." Ruby's laugh held no humor. "They're already planning to kill me. At least this way it means something." She returned the journal to its hiding place. The board slid back into position. Secrets buried in plain sight. The wind changed direction. It found gaps in the building's construction. Cold air seeped through cracks. Ruby moved to secure a loose window. Gideon joined her. Their hands worked in unison, adjusting latches, checking seals, simple tasks that built unexpected trust. "Why do you care?" Ruby asked. The question hung between them. Gideon's hands stilled on the window frame. His reflection stared back from the rain-streaked glass. "Maybe I'm tired of walking away." Ruby studied his profile. The man carried ghosts. She could see them in the set of his shoulders, the way he favored his left side, the careful distance he maintained from everything. "What happened to you?" "Same thing that's happening to you, just different players." A shutter tore loose outside. It crashed against the building before the wind claimed it. Ruby jumped. Gideon's hand found her shoulder, steady, reassuring. "We need to secure the supplies," he said. They worked through the storm, checking inventory, moving sacks away from potential leaks. Gideon's knowledge surprised Ruby. He understood buildings, weather, the practical necessities of survival. "You weren't always a mountain man," she observed. "No. What were you before?" Gideon lifted a heavy flour sack. His movements carried efficiency born of experience. "Someone who believed the law mattered." Ruby heard the past tense. The weight of disappointment in those words. She understood the feeling. Hope crushed by reality. They finished their work in comfortable silence. The cookhouse was secure against the storm. Ruby prepared coffee. The familiar routine steadied her nerves. Gideon accepted the cup. Steam rose between them. The coffee was strong, black. It matched the night outside. "The foreman will come back," Ruby said. "Yes, with more men. Probably." Ruby sipped her coffee. The heat fought against the cold fear in her chest. "What do you suggest?" "Run, tonight, before they organize." "And go where?" Gideon had no answer. There was nowhere safe for a woman alone on the frontier, especially one who'd made enemies of powerful men. "I can't run," Ruby said. "Others depend on the job. Their families need the money. Their families need them alive. You don't understand. This isn't just about me." Ruby moved to the preparation table. Her hands found busy work, cleaning, organizing, motion to fight the helplessness. "There are children in this town who eat because their fathers work for the company. Wives who have shelter because their husbands endure the abuse." She scrubbed a pot that was already clean. "If I run, I abandon them all." Gideon watched her hands work, saw the determination in every movement. Ruby Bell wasn't just another victim. She was a woman who'd chosen to stand against injustice despite the cost. "Then we need evidence," he said. "I have evidence. Evidence that matters to people who can act on it." Ruby looked up from her scrubbing. Hope flickered in her eyes, dangerous hope. "You know someone?" Gideon stared into his coffee. The dark surface reflected the lamplight. Truth demanded its due. "Maybe." Lightning split the sky. In that brief illumination, Ruby saw something change in Gideon's expression. A decision made, a line crossed. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Access to company records, financial documents, anything that shows money changing hands." "That's in the main office, locked." "Can you get inside?" Ruby considered. The office was cleaned weekly. She had keys to most buildings, but the risk was enormous. "If they catch me there." "They won't." The certainty in his voice surprised her. Gideon spoke with the confidence of a man who understood such operations. "How can you be sure?" "Because I'll be watching." Ruby set down the pot. Her hands had stopped shaking. Purpose steadied her nerves better than any medicine. "When?" "Tomorrow night, after the shift change." Thunder faded to a distant rumble. The storm was moving on. Soon dawn would break over Silver Creek. With it would come new dangers, new choices. Ruby nodded. The die was cast, two strangers bound by shared purpose against common enemies. Outside, the wind carried whispers of change. The town slept on, unaware that the balance of power had begun to shift. In the cookhouse, a woman and a man planned rebellion over cooling coffee. The night held its secrets close, but morning would demand answers neither was ready to give. The dawn came gray and unforgiving. Ruby prepared breakfast for 60 men. Her hands moved through familiar motions while her mind turned over plans. Gideon had vanished before sunrise, left no trace of his presence save the memory of shared purpose. Workers filed through the cookhouse, hollow eyes, bent shoulders, men who'd learned to swallow pride with their morning coffee. Ruby served each one, watched faces that never quite met her gaze. Martinez limped past. His ribs still pained him from last week's lesson. Chen kept his head down, spoke only English now, the language of survival. Morning, Miss Ruby. Young Thomas Williams stopped at her station, brother to the man who'd disappeared. His smile held forced brightness. Morning, Thomas. You seen my brother James around? Been 3 days now. Ruby's ladle stilled over the pot. The boy's hope cut deeper than any blade. She forced her voice steady. No, honey, haven't seen him. Thomas nodded. The light dimmed in his eyes. He took his plate and found a corner table, ate alone while conversations flowed around him. Ruby watched him pick at his food. Another family torn apart by the company's hunger. Another reason she couldn't run. Jasper Colt entered as the breakfast crowd thinned. His eyes found Ruby immediately, scanned her face for signs of weakness. She kept her expression neutral, showed him nothing. Coffee, Colt said. Ruby poured. Her hands didn't shake. The cup settled on the counter between them. Steam rose like smoke from a funeral pyre. Your mountain man friend cause you any trouble? No trouble. Good. Colt sipped his coffee. His eyes never left her face. Wouldn't want you entertaining the wrong sort of company. Ruby understood the threat. Her association with Gideon had been noted, filed away for future use. Just offered him shelter from the storm. Course you did. You're helpful that way. The words carried poison. Ruby heard the promise beneath them. Tonight's plans suddenly felt more dangerous. Colt finished his coffee, set the empty cup down hard enough to chip the rim. His smile held winter's cruelty. Clean that up, he said. Company don't pay for damaged goods. He left Ruby staring at the broken cup. Such a small thing. But in this place, small acts of destruction carried larger meaning. The day crawled past. Ruby served lunch, cleaned dishes, prepared dinner. Normal tasks that felt weighted with significance. Every movement was observed, catalogued. Evening brought shift change. Day workers trudged home. Night crew took their places. The rhythm of the mine never stopped. Men fed the machinery with their bodies. The company harvested profit from their suffering. Ruby waited until full darkness settled over Silver Creek. The keys felt heavy in her pocket, each one a risk, a choice between safety and justice. She slipped from the cookhouse through the back door, moved through shadows between buildings. The main office stood 50 yards away, windows dark, door locked. Gideon materialized from the darkness beside her. His approach had been silent, complete. Guards, too, front of the building. They'll stay put unless something draws them away. Ruby produced the keys. Her hands trembled slightly in the cold air, or from fear. The difference mattered less than steadiness. The lock turned with oiled precision. The door opened onto deeper darkness. Ruby stepped inside. Gideon followed. The space smelled of tobacco and old papers. Where? Filing cabinet, behind the desk. They moved through the office. Furniture loomed in the darkness. Ruby's knowledge of the layout guided them safely past obstacles. The filing cabinet stood locked. Ruby tried 3 keys before finding the right one. The drawer slid open. Files rustled in the darkness. Gideon lit a match. The flame revealed rows of documents, financial records, correspondence. The paper trail of systematic exploitation. Here, Ruby pulled out a thick folder, payroll records. Gideon examined the pages by matchlight. His fingers moved with practiced efficiency, found discrepancies in minutes. "Payments to workers who aren't here anymore," he said. "What do you mean?" "James Williams, listed as receiving wages this week, but you said he disappeared 3 days ago." Ruby stared at the document. Her brother-in-law's name in careful script, wages paid to a ghost. They're stealing from dead men, or men they want people to think are dead. The match burned down to Gideon's fingers. He dropped it, lit another. The brief darkness felt like falling into a grave. More files revealed the pattern. Workers reported missing continued receiving wages. Money that went somewhere else, someone else. "Look at this." Ruby found another folder. Supplies purchased but never delivered to the mine. Chains, shackles, transport costs to destinations hundreds of miles away. The documentation painted a picture too horrible to fully accept. "They're not killing them," Gideon said. "They're selling them." Ruby's hands found the desk edge, held tight against the realization. Human beings treated as inventory, lives bought and sold according to market prices. "We need to go." Gideon gathered selected documents before the guards make their rounds. They relocked the cabinet, closed the office door behind them, moved through shadows toward safety. Each step carried stolen truth closer to light. Back in the cookhouse, they spread the evidence across the preparation table. Documents told their story in columns of figures and shipping manifests. "Territorial authorities need to see this," Ruby said. "Territorial authorities might be part of it." Gideon's words hit Ruby between the shoulders. The scope of corruption suddenly felt endless. If the law itself was compromised, where could justice be found? Then what do we do? Find someone clean, someone with authority and distance from local politics. The federal marshal, if there is one, if he can be trusted. Ruby studied Gideon's face in the lamplight. His knowledge of law enforcement seemed unusually detailed, personal. "You know a lot about how these things work. Experience teaches hard lessons." "What kind of experience?" Gideon gathered the documents. His movements carried finality. The conversation was ending whether Ruby wanted answers or not. "The kind that leaves scars." Outside, footsteps crunched on gravel, multiple sets, moving with purpose toward the cookhouse. Ruby and Gideon froze. The evidence lay spread across the table between them. "Hide everything," Gideon whispered. Ruby swept documents into her journal's hiding place. The board slid shut just as Boots stopped outside the door. A fist pounded wood, authoritative, demanding, "Open up, company business." Ruby looked at Gideon. His hand rested on his revolver, ready for violence that would solve nothing and destroy everything. "Answer it," he said. "Act natural." Ruby walked to the door, her heart hammered against her ribs. She turned the handle, opened the barrier between safety and consequence. Jasper Colt stood in the doorway. 3 men flanked him. Their faces held the hardness of men paid to hurt others. "Miss Ruby," Colt's smile was all teeth. "Mind if we come in?" Behind him, Silver Creek slept on, unaware that truth and lies were about to collide in a cookhouse filled with shadows and secrets. The night held its breath, waiting for the next move in a game where the stakes were measured in human lives. Ruby stepped aside. The men filed into the cookhouse. Their boots tracked mud across her clean floor. Small violations that announced larger intentions. Colt's eyes swept the room, took inventory of everything. The preparation table, the stove, Gideon standing motionless by the window. "Working late tonight," Colt observed. "Storm damage to repair," Ruby said. "That's so." Colt moved deeper into the space. His men spread out behind him, blocking exits. "Funny thing, office door was found unlocked this evening." Ruby's pulse hammered in her throat. She kept her face neutral, gave him nothing. "Don't know anything about that." "Course you don't." Colt's attention shifted to Gideon. "You're still here. Storm's not finished." "Looks clear to me." Outside, stars pierced the cloudless sky. The lie hung between them. Obvious, deliberate. Gideon stepped away from the window. His movement drew the attention of Colt's men. Hands drifted toward weapons. The room balanced on the edge of violence. Seems like you boys are looking for something, Gideon said. Just checking on our cook, making sure she's safe. Safe from what? Colt's smile sharpened. Dangerous men. The kind who might take advantage of a woman alone. Ruby understood the threat, but something else moved beneath the words. Uncertainty. Fear dressed as authority. I can take care of myself, she said. Can you now? Colt moved to the preparation table. His fingers traced the wooden surface, looking for signs of recent use. That's good to hear, because accidents happen in places like this. One of his men circled behind Gideon. The mountain man tracked the movement without turning his head. Ruby saw calculation in his posture, a man measuring distances and angles. What kind of accidents? Ruby asked. Kitchen fires, falls down mine shafts, people disappearing in the night. Colt's eyes found hers. Course, most accidents happen to folks who stick their noses where they don't belong. I just cook and clean. Do you? Because my office lock shows signs of tampering. Fresh scratches on the metal, the kind made by someone who don't have the right key. Ruby's mouth went dry. They'd been more careful than this, but locks told stories to those who knew how to read them. Maybe you should ask someone with keys, Gideon said. Maybe I should. Colt's attention remained fixed on Ruby. Who else has access to that office? The superintendent, the paymaster, few others. All company men, loyal, trustworthy. Colt stepped closer. Not the type to steal from their employers. Then maybe nobody broke in. Maybe someone forgot to lock it proper. The suggestion hung in the air, a face-saving lie that would let everyone walk away. Ruby held her breath. Colt considered. His eyes moved between Ruby and Gideon, weighing options, calculating risks. Could be, he said finally. Men get careless sometimes, forget their duties. Relief flooded Ruby's chest. Then Colt's expression hardened again. Course, careless men don't last long in this business. Neither do people who protect them. He turned toward the door. His men followed. The cookhouse felt larger with their departure. Empty spaces filled with aftermath. Ruby, Colt paused at the threshold. Company's having a meeting tomorrow night. All supervisors. Office will be busy. The words carried weight beyond their surface meaning. Ruby nodded, understanding. Good to know. Thought you'd appreciate the information, being helpful and all. The door closed behind them. Ruby and Gideon stood alone in the sudden quiet. Outside, boots crunched away into darkness. They know, Ruby whispered. They suspect. What's the difference? Gideon moved to the window, watched shadows move between buildings. Colt's men taking positions, setting up surveillance. Suspicion needs proof. Knowledge demands action. Ruby understood. They balanced on a knife's edge. One slip would send them tumbling into consequences neither could survive. Why did he tell me about the meeting? Because he wants to see what you'll do. Whether you'll run or fight. Ruby moved to her hiding place, retrieved her journal. The leather cover felt fragile in her hands, so much truth wrapped in such vulnerable packaging. What do you think I should do? Run, tonight. Before they decide proof don't matter. I can't. Why not? Ruby opened the journal. Pages of documented suffering stared back at her. Names, dates, lives reduced to evidence. Because running won't save Thomas Williams. Or Martinez or Chen. She closed the book. It'll just mean their suffering was for nothing. Gideon studied her face, saw determination hardened into resolve. Ruby Bell had crossed some internal line, made peace with consequences. Then we need help more than just evidence. From who? Someone with authority, someone they can't intimidate or buy. Ruby laughed bitterly. In Silver Creek, company owns the sheriff, the mayor. Probably the preacher too. Not local authority, federal. Federal marshal hasn't been through here in over a year. No, Gideon's voice carried strange weight. He hasn't. Something in his tone made Ruby look closer. The man held secrets. She'd sensed it from the beginning, but now those secrets felt personal, dangerous. How do you know so much about marshals? Gideon returned to the window. His reflection ghosted in the glass. A man haunted by choices and chances, because I used to be one. The words fell between them like stones in still water. Ruby stared at his back. Pieces of the puzzle shifted into new arrangements. Used to be. 3 years ago. Before I died. You're not dead. According to territorial records, Marshal Gideon Hawk was killed investigating corruption in the mining territories, shot by unknown assailants. Body never recovered. Ruby's journal slipped from her fingers, hit the floor with a sound like breaking bones. The man she'd trusted was something else entirely, someone else. You lied to me. I omitted details. You let me plan to contact a marshal when you are one. We're one. Anger heated her voice. Why? Gideon turned from the window. His face carried the weight of old pain, old failures. Because the last time I tried to help people, they ended up dead, all of them, families torn apart, children orphaned, because I believed the law mattered more than power. What happened? I got close to exposing a trafficking operation. Human cargo shipped to factories back east, slave labor disguised as immigrant workers. His hands clenched into fists. Someone in the territorial government warned them. My witnesses disappeared. My evidence vanished. And a price was put on my head. Ruby understood now, the careful distance, the reluctance to get involved. Gideon Hawk was a man who'd learned that justice could be more dangerous than crime. So you ran. I survived. There's a difference. Is there? The question cut deep. Ruby saw it in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his eyes found the floor. I thought so until I met you. Ruby retrieved her journal, held it against her chest. The documented truth of systematic abuse, her weapon against injustice. Why tell me now? Because Colt knows something. His confidence tonight wasn't about an unlocked door. It was about knowing help isn't coming. Meaning what? Meaning if there's a federal marshal in this territory, he's either bought or dead. And if we're going to save those missing workers, we're on our own. Outside, Silver Creek settled into the deep hours of night. But in the darkness between buildings, men waited, watched, planned the next move in a game where the stakes kept rising. Ruby opened her journal again, added tonight's events to the record, evidence of conspiracy, proof of corruption, truth that might die with her if morning brought the wrong choices. Gideon Hawk watched her write, a dead marshal protecting a living woman who refused to surrender. Two broken people holding the line against forces that devoured hope. The night held its secrets, but dawn would demand a reckoning neither could avoid. Dawn brought no peace. Ruby served breakfast to hollow-eyed men who spoke in whispers. News traveled fast in Silver Creek. Workers knew something had shifted in the night's darkness. Martinez approached her station, his movements careful, calculated. "Miss Ruby, you hear about the wagons." "What wagons?" "3 of them, rolled out before sunrise. Heading east toward the railroad." Ruby's ladle trembled over the pot. Wagons meant transport. Transport meant the missing workers were being moved. "You see who was driving?" "Company men. Armed." Martinez leaned closer. "My cousin Pedro was supposed to be on one of them, for his sister's wedding in Denver." Ruby understood. Pedro hadn't volunteered for any trip. The wedding was a lie, cover for something darker. "When did you last see Pedro?" 2 days ago. Asked me to tell his wife he'd send money soon." Martinez's eyes held growing fear. "Company said he already left, but his things are still in the bunkhouse." The pattern emerged clearer. Workers disappeared gradually. Their belongings remained to maintain the illusion of voluntary departure, until transport day arrived. Ruby filled Martinez's plate with shaking hands. The food felt like communion, a last meal before revelation. "Be careful today," she whispered. Martinez nodded, understood the warning beneath her words. He took his plate and found a corner table, ate quickly, left without looking back. The morning crawled past. Ruby watched familiar faces, counted them, memorized them. Tonight would change everything for everyone. Gideon appeared at the back door as the lunch crowd dispersed. His face carried news, none of it good. Colts moving fast. Guards doubled around the compound, men asking questions in town about strangers. "They're scared. Scared people make dangerous choices." Ruby understood. Fear made men reckless, violent. The careful game was ending. "What did you find out about the wagons?" 3 freight cars attached to the eastbound train. livestock cars, but no animals loaded. The implications hit Ruby between the ribs. Livestock cars had locks on the outside. Ventilation slots too small for escape. Perfect prisons for human cargo. How many people? Don't know, but I found this. Gideon produced a torn piece of fabric, cotton, the same material as Pedro's work shirt. Stained with something dark. Ruby took the fabric, held it to the light. The stains told their own story. Blood, some, but look closer. Ruby examined the material, found traces of black powder, coal dust mixed with something else. What is it? Marking compound. Used to brand livestock before transport. The truth settled over Ruby like grave dirt. Human beings marked and sorted, prepared for sale in distant markets. We have to stop them. How? It's us against the entire company, plus whoever they're selling to. Ruby moved to her hiding place, retrieved the journal. Pages of documented evidence felt inadequate against the scale of horror they'd uncovered. There has to be someone, some authority we can reach. The territorial governor maybe, if he's clean, if we can get word to him. How long would that take? Weeks, maybe months. Ruby stared at the journal. Weeks meant more disappearances, more families torn apart, more workers branded and shipped to slavery. We don't have weeks. No, we don't. Silence stretched between them. The weight of impossible choices pressed down. Save themselves or save others. Survive or resist. Ruby closed the journal, decision made. Then we do it ourselves. Ruby? No, listen. She turned to face him. You're a federal marshal. You have authority. Had authority. I'm legally dead, remember? Then come back to life. Gideon stared at her. The suggestion carried madness and possibility. It's not that simple. Why not? You have the badge, the knowledge, the training. Ruby stepped closer. What you don't have is the will. The accusation stung. Ruby saw it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands clenched. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand perfectly. You're afraid. Damn right I'm afraid. Last time I tried this, good people died. Good people are dying now, while you hide in the mountains. The words hung between them, truth sharp enough to cut. Gideon turned away, stared out the window at the compound where men prepared for another day of systematic abuse. Even if I could, even if I resumed my authority, it's still just two of us against an army. No. Ruby moved beside him. It's not. What do you mean? Martinez knows something's wrong. Chen's suspects. Thomas Williams is asking questions about his brother. Ruby's voice gained strength. The workers aren't blind. They're just scared and alone. You want to organize them. I want to give them hope and information and a choice. Gideon considered. Ruby could see him weighing options, calculating odds, fighting internal battles between duty and survival. If we do this, if I reveal myself and try to organize resistance, there's no going back. There's already no going back. Not for me. Not after last night. Ruby was right. Colt's visit had marked them. They existed now in the space between suspicion and action. Movement in either direction meant danger. What do you need? Gideon asked. Time and distraction. Tonight's supervisor meeting will empty the office again. More evidence gathering. No, something else. Ruby moved to the supply closet, retrieved paper and ink, sat at the preparation table and began writing. What are you doing? Making copies of everything in my journal, names, dates, details. Her pen moved quickly across the paper. Each stroke duplicated truth, multiplied evidence. Multiple copies mean multiple chances for the truth to survive, she continued, even if they destroy the original. Gideon watched her work, saw determination that couldn't be broken. Ruby Bell had become something beyond victim or survivor. She'd become a force. Where will you hide them? Not hide, distribute. Ruby finished the first copy, started another. Her handwriting remained steady despite the stakes. Give them to workers, their families, people in town who still have consciences. She looked up from her writing. Make it impossible to silence all the voices. And if word gets back to Colt, then we accelerate the timeline. Ruby returned to her copying. Page after page of documented abuse transformed into seeds of rebellion. evidence that could bloom into justice if planted in the right soil. Outside, the compound hummed with activity. Men moving equipment, preparing for something. The rhythm felt different, urgent. Gideon moved to the window, studied the patterns of movement, read the signs of preparation. Ruby, what? They're not waiting for tonight. Ruby's pen stilled. She joined him at the window. Saw what he'd seen. Wagons being loaded in broad daylight, men with rifles taking positions. They're moving now, within the hour. Ruby stared at the preparations. Her copies lay unfinished on the table. Time had run out before hope could spread. Then we stopped them now. How? Ruby moved to the stove, began banking the fires, preparing for departure. Same way they stopped you 3 years ago. With witnesses they can't silence and evidence they can't destroy. She gathered her journal and the partial copies, stuffed them into a canvas bag. Where are you going? To the train station. To document what happens when those wagons arrive. Ruby, no, it's suicide. Maybe, but it's the right kind of suicide. She moved toward the door. Gideon caught her arm. His grip was gentle but firm. Then we do it together. Ruby looked into his eyes, saw the moment when Marshal Gideon Hawk stopped running from his past, started walking toward his duty. Together, she agreed. They left the cookhouse side by side. Two people choosing courage over safety, justice over survival. The afternoon sun cast their shadows long across the dusty ground. Behind them, Silver Creek continued its daily rhythm, unaware that the balance of power was about to shift. That truth was walking toward the depot with steady steps and steady hearts. The train station sat at Silver Creek's eastern edge, a weathered platform beside rusted rails that carried dreams and nightmares to distant places. Ruby and Gideon approached from the north, used storage sheds for cover. 3 livestock cars waited on the siding, their doors hung open, dark mouths ready to swallow human cargo. There, Ruby pointed to the company wagons approaching. Martinez was right. Armed men flanked the wagons, rifles held ready. They moved with the efficiency of practiced hunters herding prey. Gideon reached into his coat, retrieved a tarnished badge. The metal caught afternoon sunlight. Federal Marshal, United States territory, authority that transcended local corruption. 3 years, he said. Feels like a lifetime ago. Ruby watched him pin the badge to his shirt, saw the man transform, shoulders squared, purpose replaced doubt. What's the plan? You document. I arrest. Just like that, just like that. The first wagon reached the platform. Ruby heard voices from inside the livestock car, frightened, pleading. Men who'd already been loaded like cattle. Colt supervised the unloading. His men worked quickly, efficiently. They'd done this before. How many? Ruby whispered. Gideon counted. 8, maybe 10, hard to tell. Ruby opened her journal, began writing. Names when she could identify them, physical descriptions. Documentation of systematic human trafficking in real time. Pedro Martinez stumbled from the first wagon. Shackles bound his wrists. Blood marked his temple. His eyes found the horizon, searched for hope that wasn't coming. There's Pedro, Ruby breathed. Other familiar faces emerged. Workers who'd asked questions, complained about conditions, sought basic human dignity. Now they shuffled toward the train cars, defeated, broken. Thomas Williams appeared in the second wagon, the boy who'd asked about his missing brother. Now he understood why James never came home. Ruby's pen moved faster, captured every detail, every face, every crime. Enough evidence, Gideon said. Time to act. He stepped from behind the storage shed, badge visible, authority announced in his posture and stride. Federal Marshal, nobody move. Colt spun around. His face cycled through surprise, recognition, and calculation. Men who'd believed in ghosts suddenly faced resurrection. Gideon Hawk, heard you were dead. Reports of my death were exaggerated. Colt's hand moved toward his weapon, stopped when he saw Gideon's gun already drawn. Federal training versus local brutality, no contest. You got no authority here, this is company business. Human trafficking is federal business. Ruby emerged from cover, journal in hand. evidence of systematic abuse documented across months of careful observation. Ruby Bell, Colt snarled, should have minded your own affairs. These are my affairs. These are all our affairs. Other townspeople began gathering, drawn by the commotion. Wives looking for missing husbands, children seeking absent fathers, a community finally witnessing the truth behind the disappearances. Martinez's wife pushed through the crowd, saw her husband in shackles, cried his name across the platform. Pedro, oh God, Pedro. Her voice broke the spell of fear that had gripped Silver Creek. Other voices joined hers, recognition, grief, anger building to righteous fury. Release the prisoners, Gideon commanded. On whose authority? Gideon raised his badge higher. Let sunlight illuminate the federal seal. United States Marshal Service. I'm placing you under arrest for human trafficking, kidnapping, and conspiracy. Colt's men looked uncertain, local authority crumbling before federal power, but Colt himself remained defiant. You think that badge means something here? You think anyone will believe a dead man's testimony? They'll believe this. Ruby held up her journal, pages of documented evidence visible to the gathering crowd. Every beating, every disappearance, every crime, all recorded, all witnessed. She began reading aloud. Names, dates, details of systematic abuse. Her voice carried across the platform. Each word landed with the weight of truth. The crowd stirred, muttered. Anger rippled through the assembled townspeople. They'd suspected. Now they knew. Martinez beaten for asking about wages. Chen threatened for speaking his native language. Williams disappeared for questioning working conditions. More names followed. More crimes documented. The scope of the operation laid bare before the community that had suffered in silence. Colt realized his position, surrounded by angry townspeople, facing federal authority, evidence of his crimes being read like an indictment. Nobody's going to believe a troublemaking cook and a dead marshal. Maybe not, Ruby closed her journal, but they'll believe their own eyes. She gestured to the livestock cars, the shackled workers, the armed guards. Evidence too obvious to deny. And they'll believe the copies I made, distributed this morning to families, to honest businessmen, to the territorial newspaper. Colt's face went pale. The truth had been scattered beyond his ability to contain. Multiple voices would tell the same story, corroborate the evidence. Gideon stepped closer, gun trained on Colt's chest. Release the prisoners. Now, one of Colt's men moved to comply, produced keys from his belt, began unlocking shackles. Pedro Martinez fell into his wife's arms. Other families reunited amid tears and relief. The human cost of the trafficking operation made visible in their joy. This isn't over, Colt warned. Yes, it is. Ruby's voice carried quiet finality. She looked around at the gathered crowd, saw strength where fear had lived, community where isolation had reigned. Because they know now, all of them, and they'll never forget. Thomas Williams found his brother James among the freed prisoners. Their reunion silenced even Colt's protests. Two brothers who'd thought they'd lost each other forever. Gideon motioned to several townspeople. I need volunteers to guard these prisoners until territorial authorities arrive. Hands rose throughout the crowd. Men who'd been afraid stepped forward, offered their strength to justice. The livestock cars stood empty, their intended cargo free. The trafficking operation broken by the courage of two people who'd refused to accept injustice. Ruby opened her journal again, began recording the resolution, the arrests, the reunion of families, the moment when Silver Creek chose truth over comfort. What will you do now? Gideon asked. Keep writing, keep witnessing. Make sure this never happens again. And you? Gideon looked at his badge, then at the community that had found its voice. Think I'll stay. This territory needs a marshal who remembers what justice means. Ruby smiled. The first genuine smile she'd worn since arriving in Silver Creek. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but no longer hopeless. Workers returned to families, evidence secured for trial, a community awakened to its own power. The trafficking ring would face federal prosecution. Justice would be served. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the platform, but for the first time in months, those shadows held no fear, only the promise of tomorrow's light. Ruby closed her journal, the story complete for now, but other stories waited. Other voices needed hearing. Other truths demanded witness. In Silver Creek, the age of silence had ended. The age of testimony had begun. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.